Good evening and welcome to another episode of Late Night with Lenette. I'm Lenette Peterson, your host. Our governor is trying to make you think that she's on top of things. Maggie has come out slamming Senator Ayotte that Senator Ayotte doesn't want to vote to fill the Supreme Court vacancy. Well, if Maggie did her homework, she would see and realize that there are two videos going viral. One, our current Vice President Joe Biden. He talks about how, at the time, President Bush needs to fill that vacancy. Don't wait. And the best one, Senator Barack Obama himself is saying, no, do not fill that vacancy. Wait, let the people decide what their next choice of president. Well, gee, if our current president and vice president both thought it was a good idea when they were senators, Kelly Ayotte's just going along with all the rest of the senators. Shame on you, Governor Hussain, for thinking you know what's going on, and of course you don't, as usual. Folks, time to say no to Maggie Hassan. Vote for Senator Kelly Ayotte's re-election. My guest this evening is in his third term at the House of Representatives in New Hampshire. And if you see Representative J.R. Hoell down at the well, it's usually on a gun issue.
Usually, thank you. Good to meet you.
Welcome to my show.
Good to see you.
Always good to see you.
Yes.
Yes, and I mean, the Second Amendment issues aren't your only passion, but that is a big passion of yours.
Correct. No,
yes.
Any of the issues dealing from education through judiciary and children and family law and criminal justice are the four committees I spend most of my time in.
Right, yes, yeah. And the Second Amendment issues, I mean, our gun rights are really, they're on the cusp, it seems.
We passed a bill last year and we had thousands of petitions turned in to the governor to ask her to sign it. And after waiting 6 days, almost 7 actually, to veto the bill because she included both July 3rd and July 4th as holidays to give her the ability to wait until the following week to veto the bill. She vetoed it at the 11th hour.
Now that was constitutional carry.
That was Senate Bill 116 and that was constitutional carry. So there's a verbatim bill that has been passed by the House again that's on its way to the Senate. It's House Bill 582. And again, this will pass the Senate and go to the governor. And at some point, the governor's got to act on this. She says she is willing to protect the citizens of New Hampshire, but when it comes to protecting the women and men who choose to carry firearms to protect themselves, or those who are too frail or too small to carry a police officer around with them, she's not interested in helping them out.
Exactly. And if you look at Vermont, they have probably the fewest gun regulations.
Right.
Look at their crime rate with handguns.
I agree. Well, firearms in general, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. New Hampshire and Vermont tend to lead the nation in terms of the safest states. Vermont has the least restrictive laws. We are very close. Maine is another area that passed constitutional carry, again, has very low homicide rates. And we are far better than states with strict gun control laws like New Jersey.
Yeah, well, if you look at my two favorites, I look at Chicago and Washington, D.C. Those two cities have probably the most and strictest. Look at their crime rate with firearms. It's deplorable.
Same thing is true with New Jersey and Illinois. I just read an article the other day. There was a person arrested in New Jersey for carrying a pellet gun, without a license or without a permit of some sort to carry a pellet gun.
That's ridiculous.
And he was an actor, and he was on his way to film a show, right? So, and this was something to be used in the show as a prop, and he was arrested, potentially facing 3.5 to 7 years in jail for carrying a pellet gun with him.
I better watch out. My pen, I might be considered having a lethal weapon if I bring this pen with my lock-in load to New Jersey.
That could even trip you up at TSA, I've heard.
Yes, it can. Oh, it's hysterical. Yes, but it's a pen.
Bills that are in the House this year, we've
got a
number.
I was going to ask you.
So there are a couple of bills still in play. We've got House Bill 512, which is an extension of a bill that was passed in 2006 after Katrina, which was known as the Katrina Act at the time, to prohibit the government from taking and confiscating firearms. Unfortunately, the language that was passed in that statute back then isn't broad enough, and it doesn't go to accessories and ammo and other things. It if you have a firearm and they confiscate all your magazines, for instance, right, the firearm is less useful. It's a hammer. So that bill is working its way through. Likewise, as I just said, House Bill 582, which was constitutional carry, again, has passed the House. It's in the hands of the Senate. There will be a hearing scheduled sometime after crossover, so sometime in the April timeframe or May timeframe, and then that bill will presumably go to the governor as well for.
Now, I know the answer to this question. It didn't pass veto proof, I'm sure. Or was it close?
I don't have the numbers in front of me on how it passed the House, because the last time this bill was passed, it was a Senate bill. Our Constitution requires that it go back to the body that originated the bill, so it had to go to the Senate, and it failed to receive the 2/3 majority it needed in the Senate to pass the bill. Last September, when the governor last July, when the governor vetoed the budget, and then we got called into a special session in September to address her failure to provide finances to run the state, we had an emergency bill that got pushed through by the Senate. It was Senate Bill 9. While the bill was in the House, we actually tried to tack on to that bill Senate Bill 116, which was an appropriate thing to do. It actually affects finances a little bit in the state police department.
And plus, it had already basically passed the House.
It had passed both bodies, so it's germane according to both the House and the Senate rules. And additionally, it's got wide support amongst the people. So we tried to tack it on, and unfortunately, we didn't get the necessary votes to tack it on, and it was surprising that 5 members out of Merrimack,
Ouch.
Hinch, Berry, Christensen, Pellegrino, and Strait all voted against the amendment to support constitutional carry as part of a bill to go to the governor. And we know had it been tacked on to that bill, it would have passed and become law, because the governor would have been in the awkward bind of being able to deal with, well, do I have a budget to run, or do we pass constitutional carry? So anyway, you okay there?
I don't know, I'm choking on my breath.
That's not good.
No, not at all. So
5 Merrimack reps.
Excuse me, 5 Merrimack reps voted against constitutional
carry. Yes.
That's a shame.
That is.
It's a constitutional right, and above that, it's a God-given right. It's a God-given right to protect yourself.
And it's easy, absolutely, and it's easy to vote for a bill when the bill is the only bill and there's no real effort behind to oppose the measure. It's a lot harder to stick, right, to put yourself on the line and say, yes, I fundamentally believe in this right all the time, such that when it gets tacked on to a budget bill, for instance, which was an appropriate thing to do, right? It affected the state police revenue enough that it was a legitimate budget bill item that they didn't want to go out and support it at that point. So this shows the difference between those who are willing to follow and those who are willing to lead.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no way you could call it a non-germane bill.
Right. It had already passed both bodies.
Yeah.
The governor had, unfortunately, at that point, had vetoed it, and vetoed it the same day. Vetoed it, and the Senate had failed to override the veto. So this was a clean way for the House and Senate to ensure that it passed. And we've got the votes. The difference between having 61, 62, 63% and having 66%, which is enough to override the veto, is huge. That 3% becomes the controlling measure on whether we as a state pass this bill. And I'm sure you're aware, there's 2 really large firearms manufacturers in New Hampshire, both Sig Arms and Ruger, who employ, in one case, almost 1,000 people, in the other case, 700 or 800 people. That's a lot of jobs at stake. And we clearly want to make New Hampshire a friendly place for jobs.
Yeah, and my house, we have a Ruger and a Sig. Good guns. You want to keep manufacturing companies in New Hampshire. Right. It's tough enough as it is with some of the business, so taxes and things like that, to bring companies here.
Right.
If you already have some here, try to keep them here.
Right. It's not necessarily a business-friendly environment anyway.
Exactly.
We've got the highest business taxes in the Northeast. I actually think they're the highest business taxes for the business profits tax at 8.5% in the entire country.
I thought I was going to say in the country.
The Tax Foundation had done an interesting write-up, and although we are 7th overall, and the Democrats love to tout that we're 7th in terms of this whole tax structure funding our state government, it's because there's no sales tax. We're either number 1 or number 2 in no sales tax, right? And there's no income tax, right? So we're number 1 and number 2. So the only personal taxes directly are the interest and dividends tax. So they average out those two things, and then they were in the low 40s or high 40s, I guess, for business profits tax and other regulations, and that averages out as 7th just because we're so good on having no income tax and no sales tax.
But then if you add cost of energy,
right,
we're 5th in the nation with most expensive electricity.
Right.
You know, you have a big plant, you have a big office, it's going to cost you huge bucks.
That's right.
If you have companies here, keep them here.
Right. So
that's very disappointing that we had so many Merrimack state reps vote against it.
It is, and they're going to claim, well, they redeemed themselves because they voted for it when the bill was by itself. Well, that's easy when you've got the entire House going with you.
Exactly.
It's always harder to paddle upstream a little bit, and we're clearly fighting the governor and those who are anti-gun, who want to basically restrict us and turn us into more like a Massachusetts or, heaven forbid, Illinois. We've seen what happens in Chicago. That's not a friendly place to live.
No, and fortunately, we have Representative Janine Notter and Representative Josh Moore that voted for our gun rights.
So there's 8 reps. Well, who would have been the third person who voted, right?
Who did you list?
It was Hinch and Barry and
Jack Balcom.
I don't remember how Balcom voted.
I don't know how Jack voted.
But I know Representative Moore and Representative Notter voted correctly. And this is the right thing, is we want to make sure people can protect themselves.
Exactly. And I mean, some of these places, you go into Manchester late at night, I'm sorry, even sometimes during the day, depending on where you're going.
And we don't necessarily track, other than public papers, for instance, how many times firearms are used defensively to protect somebody. But a couple months ago, that one 65-year-old lady, or whatever her age was, walking around Manchester, getting out of her car, somebody came up to mug her and take whatever she had. That ended successfully for her, as opposed to some of the other times she would have ended up in the hospital.
Exactly. She's my hero.
So, yes, absolutely.
Now, what other, do you have some bills this year that are coming up?
There are still a couple bills in the House this year. There's suitable person. So, in terms of history, there was a court case lost in the town of Hooksett. It was Hooksett versus Doyton, or I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. And he argued that the back of the form had some information which made him a legitimate, suitable person, or his attorney did. And at the end, unfortunately, that court case was lost. There was a finding. It wasn't actually decided as a court case. They rendered a judgment or something. It wasn't a true full court case at the Supreme Court. And they basically required the AG and the Department of Safety to get rid of the information on the back of the form, which for years, for almost a decade, was, here's why we are a shall issue state, right? As long as you're not a prohibited person, and prohibited person was defined kind of on the back of the form, you shall get issued a firearm. So this year we have a bill in House Bill 1400, which basically says a suitable person is someone who's not prohibited from owning or possessing a firearm.
Makes sense.
And unfortunately, the House Committee of Criminal Justice and Public Safety found that was unreasonable and inexpedient to legislate. So we're going to have a floor fight coming up sometime, probably early March, on 10th and 11th, to fight this, because it is the right thing. This is defining in statute. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh yeah, we want all the privileges in the world to decide who's suitable, and then haphazardly apply that law throughout the state. We're not a home rule state. And then, or the other side of the coin, which is we define in statute what's a suitable person. A suitable person is someone who can go out and buy a firearm. And then if they can buy a firearm, presumably they should be allowed to carry it.
Exactly. And now, inexpedient to legislate means to kill it. It means we don't want it. It's no good. And it's tough once a committee has ITL'd a bill to get it overturned on the House floor.
Sometimes it is.
Sometimes. No, I did overturn one out of judiciary. My last term, it was a Democrat who was the prime sponsor. I can't think of his name. I know him by his nickname. He looks like Eddie Munster.
Okay.
I can't think of his name.
Okay.
But anyways, it was to give civil immunity to gun owners if their gun is stolen and used in a crime.
Okay.
Judiciary, which was my committee, killed it.
Right.
I told Madam Chair I was going to fight it on the floor. I spoke 3 minutes. Gene Chandler at the time was the minority leader. Right.
Right.
He did the PR, and we got it overturned on the House and passed. And I think Madam Chair is still angry to this day.
That's okay.
But yeah, it doesn't happen often.
It doesn't happen, but it actually
But it does.
It does happen. We had a bill that was 19-0 on consent ITL, so you can't get any right. So there's this is the House calendar, right? Part of the bills that show up here in the list is the committee is basically universally in agreement with this idea: either pass the bill with an amendment, or kill the bill. So we had a committee, and this was Commerce, that decided, Ways and Means decided 19-0 that this bill should die. And I looked at it and said, this is a good bill. This was House Bill 668 this time. It's a good bill for finances, and it allows accountants who follow Section 179 deductions to let businesses write off some of the assets they purchased that year as opposed. And understandably, when the committee was hearing the bill, the federal government was wavering back and forth whether they should extend this program, not extend this program, what the limits should be. The limits on that bill, currently New Hampshire statute, are $25,000. The federal government was talking about $100,000. Lo and behold, in December, they actually went to $500,000 and made it permanent. And it allows for someone to write off, I purchased some computers, I purchased some assets, I write it off in year one as opposed to just doing standard deductions over the life of the asset. So it's revenue neutral, not necessarily year one, but over the life of all these assets. Over 7 years, it's arguably revenue neutral. And it encourages investment, which encourages people to grow and bring businesses to New Hampshire. So we fought that on the floor. I pulled it off consent. We fought it on the floor, and lo and behold, a bill that was 19-0 on ITL on consent passed last week.
Very good.
So it is possible.
And that's exciting because too many committees kill too many good bills. Right. And sometimes it's for mundane, stupid reasons.
And the only change to the bill, was the date got pushed out 2 years so it can go into the next budget cycle. That was the only difference between the bill as filed. It would have been effective 2016. It moved out 2017 so they can plan for it in the next budget cycle.
There you go. Good for you.
And that's, So.
Yeah.
Other bills for that are still in the House, 1645. So we're an open carry state. Mm-hmm. However, if you happen to get in a car, right, you have to unload your firearm, which for a semi-automatic pistol, if you don't have a round in the chamber, becomes really easy, right? Drop the magazine, you're done. It's not necessarily the case for if you carry a round in the magazine or if you carry a revolver. So imagine the guy who shows up to the parking lot at the grocery store, he gets out of his car and he's loading his revolver, right? The mass hysteria by everybody else, all the other patrons going, oh my goodness, this guy's loading his gun. Well, he's loading his gun because our statute actually says you can't carry it loaded in the car. That's not true in a bunch of other states. I mean, the South has a lot of open carry states, and they make it clear that the vehicle is treated like your home, and because it's treated like your home, I mean, they need a search warrant to go into your car. They can't just say, oh, hop out, I want to go search your car. It's treated just like your house and your curtilage, so therefore, it falls under different rules. And open carry in a car is fine, even if it's concealed because it's part of your car. You don't worry about concealing a firearm at home. So we're working on seeing if we can get that one passed. It came out ITL, but by a very, very close margin. The amendment the bill as introduced had some drafting issues. It wasn't grammatical, but it wasn't worded well enough. We drafted a minority amendment. It will be in the House calendar for the March 9th and 10th hearings, or for the House to act on. And it will solve the language issues that were concerned to the committee. So hopefully we can overturn that and pass that on to the Senate.
It only makes sense. I mean, when you're driving, especially females,
right.
You're driving in your car, and how many times do you see on those cop shows on TV, someone bangs into your car from behind, you pull over, and you're robbed, you're raped, or something.
Right.
You know, if you have an unloaded gun in your car, oh, excuse me, sir, hold on while I load my gun.
Right.
That ain't going to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's crazy. An unloaded gun is a hammer.
Right. And so by allowing it to be in a holster, potentially, right, in a car loaded, which is a safe place to allow for a firearm, the police are better off. At the end of the day, right, it's much harder to get a firearm out of a holster than it is, right, on the seat sitting there. And just in general, this is a good, safe way to allow people to carry in cars. Oh, yeah. So we've made the argument, and we'll see whether we can convince the House on the 9th and 10th, 9th or 10th, whatever day this comes up, to flip the committee report and pass this. It's a logical extension of the laws that we've had today and puts no one in danger. Oh, yeah, not at all. So, it's more of a protective bill for the owner of the car. Right. Yeah, I mean, even men.
How many men, the road rage, you hear of cases of road rage all the time. Someone runs up to your car, you want to defend yourself.
Right. Yeah. So, and again, the mass hysteria, we've heard of the term swatting, when someone comes along and says, oh yeah, there's a guy carrying, right? If the average person goes along and is at the supermarket or at the I don't know, the bank, even worse, right, and sees someone get out and start loading a firearm, they're going to freak out. And
big time.
And then it wastes police force because there's no real issue, there's no victim, there's no crime. But at the end of the day, people are going ahead and showing up to, or the police are being called to that incident, and they're not serving the needs of the citizens elsewhere.
Yeah, no, it's just crazy. Common sense legislation should pass.
Right. So we're working on that one. And then hopefully we can get, as I said before, constitutional carry passed and back to the governor's desk. And hopefully this time she'll see the wisdom in passing it. Maine has it, Vermont has it. It's time for us between the two states.
Oh, yeah, exactly. No kidding. And this isn't even a Republican-Democrat issue. There were a lot of Democrats who are pro-Second Amendment.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes,
no.
yeah.
And traditionally these bills pass with 60 to 65% margin.
Right.
But you got to get it out of both houses with greater than 66 if the governor is going to veto it.
Right.
And unfortunately, that extra percent makes a big difference.
Oh, huge. So, and when you have Republicans voting against something that's constitutional, that's just so disappointing.
Right. So that vote on SB 9, that one floor amendment, is a good way to know who actually supports the Second Amendment and who doesn't.
Right, exactly. So, wow.
One other thing, and this goes to protecting gun rights as a whole, right? Every year or every 2 years we have an election, and candidates need to file and run. And a lot of people say, oh, I could never do that. I don't know how to do that. What's involved? I would encourage you to contact current Merrimack reps. If you're watching this from Merrimack, right, you've got Representative Josh Moore and Representative Janine Nutter. Okay, contact them and say, hey, I'm interested in running, especially if you're willing to help go to the State House and work on making New Hampshire a better state to live in. Exactly.
And to say that, I couldn't do that. I have no experience. I'm a perfect example. I was a PE teacher at a private Christian school, PE teacher, athletic director.
Right.
I mean, what did I know about it? Nothing. I had a great mentor in the Honorable Nancy Elliott. I went on the House Judiciary Committee, one of the busiest committees up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the most stressful committees. Freshman term, I was the clerk as well. You learn, and it's amazing. And I always say anyone who has the slightest interest in serving needs to run.
And if you can't, and if you're watching it outside of Merrimack, and Representative Notter and Representative Moore are not necessarily your reps, feel free to contact me. My information is readily available. I don't mind encouraging and helping people to run. Last year I helped recruit several candidates who all ended up in office. It's not hard if you're interested.
Right.
And
it's so rewarding.
It is rewarding.
My 4 years up at the State House, I could write a book on the experience. Well, it was just so cool.
You learn a lot, and you learn how, at the end of the day, there are people who may be fundamentally opposed, but on a philosophical issue. But how do you work together on this other issue, right?
Right. Yeah. So and the opportunities that are available here in New Hampshire once you're in politics. I mean, with us being first in the nation, it's just phenomenal. I mean, I had never met a presidential candidate before until moving to New Hampshire. Right. I can remember, and I used this example before. My husband and I lived in Richmond, Virginia, back in the 90s.
Okay.
We voted for Governor Jim Gilmore.
Okay.
Never met him. I didn't meet him until living in New Hampshire, and he was running as president. I had lunch with him. I had never met him as my governor.
Right.
But run for president, you'll meet him in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And it's clear, New Hampshire, unlike the rest of the country, is very much a state house run by people who are volunteers. I mean, the pay rate's not great. You put in a lot of time. You get pennies per hour by the time you include all the hours you put in. But you do get a chance to affect long-term very positively.
Oh, exactly. Are you serving to get rich, or are you serving to serve?
Right.
Now, my first term, my husband figured out, he said he greatly rounded up. I made about 4 cents an hour my first term. But the benefits and what I got out of it,
absolutely,
were priceless.
Right.
Priceless.
And I go back to House Bill 668, the one I mentioned before about Section 179 deductions, right? I'm a business owner. I understood what that meant when I read the House calendar. I'm like, why are they ITLing this bill? This is a great bill. And there is no negative financial consequences. In fact, arguably, if you encourage businesses to invest more, they're going to spend their dollars. If they're spending their dollars, some other business is going to have a profit. I could make a principled case why this actually generates more revenue. Okay, and Ways and Means is killing the bill. And I'm like, this makes no sense. Find out what the problem is, right? Oh, we're concerned about the fact that it gets enacted in this budget. Oh, that's an easy thing to fix. Go fix that. Oh, we're concerned about the fact that the federal government didn't know what they were doing, literally. In particular, in particular for this Section 179 deduction at the time we were discussing it. Well, they had already decided what to do by the time we were acting on it in January. So now we have enough information to know this policy is now permanent. This policy is now $500,000 to write off per year, not 25 or 100. So why should New Hampshire be at $25,000 worth of allowable write-off per year when Maine and Massachusetts and some of the other states around us, okay, in the Northeast here, are all at 500? That's a very big disincentive to businesses. They're going to want to move to other states. Let's move them back here.
Exactly. And you never know. Like, you're a businessman.
Right.
There are plenty of bills up there that have to do with business. If you're a teacher, there's a lot of education bills. You never know what experience you're going or expertise you're going to bring to whatever bill comes up.
We've had reps that are home builders, right?
Exactly.
Representative Groen, who stands up there and argues. We've had attorneys, we've had engineers, we've had teachers, we've had stay-at-home moms.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you're interested at all in being involved and you don't know what to do and I can't win, I don't know how to run, I don't know what's involved, feel free to give Representative Notter, Representative Moore, or myself a call. We can talk to you about the process. I have no problem helping coach somebody to run for office. Been there, done that.
Or you can even contact me. I was a state rep for 2 terms, and the experience is priceless.
Yes.
Well, we are at the end of the show.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Time passes quickly.
Always good talking with you.
Yes, likewise.
I'm looking forward. I'm going to be up at the State House when your bills are up there, so it's going to be interesting.
Yes, no.
I thank you for tuning in to another episode of Lenette. Good night and God bless.